Fractured Secrets, Daughter of Sea and Sky, Book 2, written by AR Colbert, narrated by Jennifer Groberg. Part 1. The Siren. Chapter 1. I have a confession. Gayla crinkled her nose and hid behind one of the throw pillows on her couch, or I suppose it was our couch now. Ever since I'd agreed to attend Columbia, the girls had been moving at 100 miles per hour to get me comfortable and settled into my bedroom in their apartment, our apartment. It was going to take me some time to get used to saying that. "What did you do?" She scoffed, pretending to be insulted. "I didn't do anything. I'm basically the most angelic friend you have." I snorted at that. Gayla was a sweet girl, but innocent wasn't at the top of the list of adjectives I'd use to describe her. "It's more like I saw something." She bit her lip, playing up the suspense. "Well, are you going to tell me what it was?" I laughed. Gayla almost seemed nervous, and that wasn't like her at all. "Okay." She took a deep breath. "I knew you weren't going to NYU. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I knew it before you decided. I saw you at Columbia with me and Dom." "Like in a vision?" I pulled my feet up underneath me and turned to face her, throwing the pillow away to get a better look at her. Gayla nodded. "That's incredible." "You're not mad at me for keeping it from you?" "No, I'm not mad at all. In fact, I'm glad you didn't tell me before. If you had, I probably would have stayed at NYU just to prove you wrong. Then we'd all be grumpy." She grinned. "Yeah, I figured as much. Plus, with as wonky as my visions are, I never can be too sure if it's real or a daydream, you know?" I nodded. She hadn't had a single successful vision in the short time I'd known her, until now. "Maybe your lessons with Russell are paying off." "Ugh, I hope they pay off quickly. I'm sick of seeing that smug old son of a—" "Hello!" Dom burst through the front door with more fervor than usual. "Hey!" I glanced over my shoulder to greet her and immediately jumped out of my seat when I caught a glimpse of her. "Dom! Your hair!" Gayla jumped up too and followed me over to our smiling friend. Dom did a small circle in the entryway, then twisted her mouth nervously to one side. "Do you like it?" "I love it," Gayla squealed. "I do too. It suits you." Dom's platinum blonde hair, which once hung in waves a few inches past her shoulders, just like Gayla's, was now chopped short. Layers jutted out at fun angles, framing her high cheekbones like a rock star. She looked a little like Blondie from the 80s. "Phew," Dom exhaled. "I mean, I love it either way, but I'm relieved to hear you like it too. I finally feel like I'm ready to tackle the first day of classes on Monday." We spent the next few minutes gushing over Dom's new do before I finally had to call it a night. In just 3 short days, I would walk onto campus and finally get a little backstory on who I was and where I came from. The only problem was that I had about 18 years of catching up to do just to even the playing field with my peers. They'd all grown up in this world. They knew what it meant to be a keeper. I didn't. But with a few books from my aunt and the girls, I was absorbing as much information as possible. I wanted to be ready on Monday, or at least come prepared with enough background information to not look like a total dunce if the professor called on me. Did professors call on students in college? "Night, girls." I retreated into my room and pulled out my toiletries bag. The amber bottle that housed my vitamins clinked at the bottom. There were only a handful left now, and I still wasn't sure where I could order more. I'd swing by Millie's shop tomorrow to see if she knew what they were. Millie knew everything about medicine and supplements. Surely she could get me some more, even if she didn't know where my mom originally ordered them from. Wait a minute. My mom ordered them. Gayla! I darted back out of my bedroom door, an idea still stretching its way through my mind like taffy. Gayla, I need your help. My roommate startled, with wide eyes and open mouths, as I burst back into the living room, stumbling over the throw pillow I'd tossed haphazardly on the floor earlier. Here! I shoved the amber bottle into Gayla's hand. My vitamins! My mom was a freak about me taking these every day. She had them specially ordered and everything. Do you think there's a strong enough connection to her that you might be able to use a bottle to induce another vision? Everly, you know my visions are only mediocre at best, and that's if I can even get them to work. But you're getting better. You knew I was coming to Columbia, didn't you? Dom raised a knowing brow. That traitor. She knew it too, and neither one of them admitted it to me. I did, Gayla said. But that was like 1 in 100. I'm still really bad at this. Will you try, please? Gayla twirled the bottle around an inch from her nose, taking a closer look. These look kinda sketchy. Never mind the vitamins, I huffed. Do you think they have a strong enough connection to my mom for you to see her? I'll take anything you can learn about where she might be. She shrugged. Only one way to find out. Dom and I followed her back to the couch. Gayla sat cross-legged on the floor in front of us, holding the bottle between both hands. Eyes closed, she began mouthing something so quietly I only heard the softest ghost of a whisper drifting across the space between us. 1 minute stretched to 2, 3. Her mouth stopped moving, but her eyes remained closed. I glanced at Dom, who gave a small, reassuring nod. Maybe it was working. After about 5 minutes, Gayla still hadn't moved. I was nearly ready to chalk it up as a failed attempt when at last her eyes popped open. Her normally rich brown irises were stained black and enlarged until the whites of her eyes were just barely visible around the edges. She stared into the distance, beyond the room we sat within, seeing something I couldn't even begin to name. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't hers. It was deeper, raspier, full of authority, and I knew. Gayla saw my mom. The bars, she began, are firm and unrelenting. There's nowhere to go. It's impossible to run. My breath hitched. Dom gripped my hand in hers as we both scooted to the edge of the couch, leaning in closer to Gayla so as not to miss a single word. The woman has great power. Her eyes glow with it, blue like the ocean. It's bursting at the seams, but it cannot be released. She must wait until he returns to set her free. She dropped her chin and closed her eyes again. No one moved a muscle. I didn't even dare to take a breath. After several more seconds of silence, Gayla's body was racked with tremors. I jumped to her side, but they passed just as quickly as they had come on. She lifted her head and blinked her pretty brown eyes a few times before grinning. I think it worked. You saw her, my mom? I think so. Gayla nodded emphatically. She looked a little like you, but her eyes were so mesmerizing. Your mom's kinda hot. I shook off her commentary and grabbed Gayla by the knees. We were all on the floor now, anxiously waiting to hear what else she might be able to reveal. Okay, tell me everything. I did. Gayla looked confused. I spoke out loud during the vision, right? Yeah, but your language was vague. What did you see? I saw your mom behind bars. She was in some kind of cell, and her eyes were glowing with power. She shrugged. That's about it. You said she was waiting on someone to release her. Who? I don't know. The visions aren't always clear, especially when they involve the thoughts of a subject rather than physical details. It's okay. Dom patted my back, picking up on my frustration. She's got her powers, so she'll be able to bust out of that cell in no time. She was a messenger, right? She had her powers bound after I was born. My shoulders slumped as I realized we were no closer to finding her now than we had been before. Not true, Gayla said. If her eyes were glowing, she's got her powers back. How can that be? And if she has her powers, why is she still hanging out in the cell? The binding only works on Earth, Dom said. If she's in Keeper territory, her powers would be fully restored. And if that's the case, there are different enchantments placed on Keeper prisons to prevent escape. But Millie reported her as missing to the council. They said she hadn't been located. Wouldn't they confer with the other Keepers? I'm sure they did, but they may not get the truth if whoever took her as a prisoner doesn't want anyone else to know. But why? Why would someone want to take her at all? I buried my face into my hands. None of this made any sense. I wanted to ask Gayla to try again, but the way she was sprawled out across the floor now told me that it had probably taken a lot out of her. She was awfully pale. Can we go to the Keeper territories ourselves and try to find her? Dom frowned. Even if it were that easy, which it's not, you'd die if you tried to access the Keeper lands. You're still immortal. I cursed under my breath. The answer was so close, and yet there was still not a thing I could do about it. Not unless I somehow got my powers to shift into gear. Assuming I had any, that is. Chapter 2. Sean knocked on our door the next morning right on time, but my Atlantean guard dog was looking much less Doberman and much more Basset Hound this morning. "What's up?" I asked, as we made our way out onto the street. Nothing. I'm good. How's life with the Olympians?" "It's great, actually. Gayla's visions are starting to work." He shoved his hands into his pockets and stared straight ahead as we walked. "Did you hear me? She had a vision last night, right in front of me and Dom. She saw my mom." He wasn't listening to a word I said. "Sean," I nudged him with my elbow. "Yeah, I'm good." Ugh, no use talking to a broken record. I left him alone and got lost in my own thoughts the rest of the way to Millie's shop. It was a long walk, but that was good. I had lots of thinking to do. I would try to get Millie alone once we got there and show her my vitamins to see if she could order me some more. And while we were on the subject, I might try to get a little more information about my mom's powers as well. Dom had seemed really confident that being in Keeper territory would restore them. Surely Millie would know something about that. Finally, we reached the door to the apothecary. Sean paused a few feet from the entrance. "Aren't you coming in?" I asked. "Nah, I'm gonna head back. I'll pick you up when you're done with your shift." "Sean, that's crazy. You just walked for like half an hour. Come in and rest for a second. Get a drink before you head back." He pursed his lips, but I grabbed him by the arm anyway and tugged him inside with me. I kind of wanted Millie to have a look at him, too. He was acting very strangely. "Good morning," Abby called out from behind the counter. "Hi, Sean." He yanked his arm loose and spun around, bolting out of the door in about half a second. Abby's lip trembled, and she cleared her throat. "Excuse me for a minute," she said, brushing past Millie on her way to the storage area in the back of the shop. Good morning," I called out to no one in particular. "What was that all about?" Millie shrugged, though I suspected she knew more than she was letting on. "Who knows? How are you doing this morning? All ready for school to start in a couple of days?" "Just about. I've got one more textbook to pick up, then I think I'm set." I pulled the amber vitamin bottle from my purse and set it on the counter in front of my aunt. "Hey, do you know what kind of vitamins these are?" She picked it up, examining the glass and the pills inside. "Nope, never seen these before. They don't have any markings." She squinted at the few pills rattling around in the bottom of the bottle. My mom always special ordered them for me, but I don't know from where. I was hoping to get some more. We can definitely get you some more vitamins, and maybe some that look a little more trustworthy. Millie laughed. That made 2 people in the last 24 hours who implied my vitamins were sketchy. But they were totally normal. I'd been taking them my entire life, and generally speaking, I wasn't too weird or messed up. No, I think it has to be these. Mom said she tried several different kinds when I was younger, and I had bad reactions or something. I don't know. All I know is that she was kind of a dictator when it came to my vitamins. It had to be this kind, and I had to take them every day, right on time. Millie frowned. Was all she said to that. Well, I can send one off to the lab to see if they can break it down and figure out what it's made of, if it's really that important to you. Thanks. I know it sounds silly, but it really is important to me. It's like the last connection I still have to her, you know? Millie pulled me into a quick hug, kissing the top of my head as Abby re-emerged from the back. I know, sweetheart. I'll do my best. Unfortunately, with Abby back in the room, I couldn't inquire further about my mom's powers. I'd have to save that discussion for later. Millie stepped out to grab us some deli subs around lunchtime, and Abby cornered me the instant the door swung shut behind her. Hey, can I talk to you about something? It's kind of personal. Yeah, sure. I scanned the shop looking for some excuse to get me out of this, in case she started asking about keeper stuff that I couldn't reveal. Had she overheard something? Maybe she saw Millie enchanting a drought for one of the Olympian men who swung by earlier. Shoot, I was not ready for this. Have you talked to Sean much lately? Oh, that. I might have rather dealt with the keeper's secrets than talked to Abby about Sean. Not much. Why? He seems a little standoffish lately. I was just wondering if he maybe confided anything to you about why he's behaving that way. I paused to take a good look at the girl. Her puffy eyes and blotchy nose revealed that she was much more upset about this than she tried to let on. And if there was something truly wrong with Sean, I probably needed to suck it up and work with Abby to get it figured out. I'm sorry, I said. I noticed he was really weird this morning with his head in the clouds, but he didn't say anything to me about why. She sniffled. Okay, thanks. Wait. I caught her elbow as she tried to turn away. Is everything okay? Do you know something I don't? Does he need help? Her lip trembled again. I think I messed everything up. Her words were gobbled by sobs, and she buried her face in my shoulder. It's okay, I said, lightly patting her on the back. She sucked up a nose full of snot and released another wave of wails. Poor girl was ugly crying on me, and I was too uncomfortable to do anything but awkwardly pat her on the back. How on earth was anyone so worked up over Sean? Don't cry, Abby. I'm sure you didn't mess anything up. Tell me what happened. Last I know, he was rushing to comfort her after we eliminated the man poisoning her father. She was the first person on his mind. There was no way she could have messed up their friendship. I kissed him. Okay, maybe there was one way. She inhaled snotty mouthfuls of air. He came over to check on me the other night. He was so concerned and just really seemed like he cared. But I must have misinterpreted it, because I kissed him and he left right away. Now he's not talking to me at all. I pulled away to grab her a tissue, and she just kept right on spilling her secrets to me. Now I know he was only being nice to me because my dad was sick. And now my dad is feeling better, but I almost wish we could go back to how things were a week ago when Sean still cared. What kind of terrible person does that make me? Her words were drowned out again in a soft cry, followed by a loud trumpet-like blow into her tissue. "You're not a terrible person at all, Abby. Sean is just a supernatural being who can never be with a mortal. Ugh, how was I going to make her feel better about this? He's just a guy. Guys this age don't know how to show their emotions. He probably really likes you, but he's scared, you know? I'm sure things will get back to normal between you two soon. But for now, maybe just give him a little bit of space. I just wish I could find a guy who wasn't afraid to show interest. Someone who puts me first and lets me know how he feels. Someone brave enough to let me know that he's only got eyes for me. There's gotta be one out there somewhere, right?" The front door chimed. I turned to greet our new customer, seeing as how Abby was in no kind of shape to talk to anyone, and my jaw dropped. Abby gasped behind me. "Everly Gordon, I've been looking all over the city for you." "Is that?" Abby whispered. "Clayton Miles." The A-list actor gracing every tabloid in the country walked forward with his hand extended. Abby reached out, soggy tissue still clamped between her fingers, and shook his hand. "Clayton Miles," she repeated, dumbstruck. She still had his hand gripped in hers, the snot rag the only thing separating them. "Abby," I pulled her gently away from him. "Why don't you go get cleaned up? I need just a minute." She nodded, mouth still agape, and retreated to the back of the shop. As soon as the green curtain swished shut behind her, I turned to face our handsome new visitor. "Why would you be looking for me?" A quick glance over his shoulder revealed that he was alone. "Well, I'm in town to film a movie, and I remembered you said you were in the city. You're going to Columbia, right?" Did I mention where I lived to him? We only spoke for half a minute on Gayla's boat in the Hamptons. I definitely didn't say I was going to Columbia because I didn't think I was at the time. "There are 8 million people in this city. I can't imagine why you would attempt to find me. And how did you wind up here at the apothecary?" Something about this seemed off. "The keepers are a tight-knit bunch," he winked, and I noticed his hazel eyes still contained the standard Agarthian golden flecks. I guess he couldn't completely hide his true identity. I resisted the way my stomach still wanted to somersault at the sight of him, and focused on getting to the bottom of this. "I'm not a keeper. Your tight-knit bunch doesn't even know who I am." "They know your aunt. Come on, Ev." He reached out and allowed his hand to glide down my upper arm, the way a friend or a lover might do. "Lighten up. My movie is filming on your campus, and I just thought it would be nice to have a friendly face around the set. Maybe you can show me some of your favorite spots around the area." "It's Everly," I said, stepping away. "And I don't have any favorite spots on campus. I haven't even started school yet." I looked through the storefront windows again, searching for any reasonable evidence that might indicate why he was truly here. Was I being pranked? Did Gayla put him up to this? If so, the prank was going sour. He might charm every girl in his path. He even charmed me the first night we met. But I was less than impressed by this encounter. In fact, it was a little unsettling. Never in a million years would I have thought getting hit on by a gorgeous global celebrity would leave me feeling creeped out. "Okay." He raised both hands in the air. "I can see that you're busy working right now. I shouldn't have interrupted you unannounced like this. But I happen to know there's a back-to-school party next week at St. A's, and I'd love it if you came. I'm going so I can get into character for my role." "St. A's?" "Don't worry, I can get you in." "I don't know." I shook my head. "I don't know what that is or care to attend any parties. Look, Clayton, I appreciate you stopping by, but I really just want to focus on my schoolwork. I'm not interested in—" He laughed, cutting me off. This guy obviously wasn't used to rejection. But did I really just reject Clayton Miles? Who was I? I was a girl on a mission, that's who, and I didn't need any boys, celebrity heartthrob or otherwise, distracting me from my studies. I had to find my mom. Don't say no. Just say you'll think about it. He winked again and turned toward the door. I'll see you around, Ev. It's Everly, I called out, but the door had already swung shut behind him. Chapter 3. I'd forgotten all about Clayton by the time Monday morning rolled around. I hadn't seen much of Sean either. He'd laid low, content that Gayla and Dom were sufficient to keep me well guarded in his absence. There were some definite perks to living with keepers. Dom and I shared our first class Monday morning. It was the one I'd been looking most forward to, a review of the ancient languages. Though it was more like an intro than a review for me. Still, apparently Professor Brossard was the go-to guy when it came to ancient texts and forgotten languages. I guzzled down my latte from the honey pot and quickly wiped the foam from my upper lip. Easy there, killer, Dom laughed, but she looked just as excited as I felt. Her short hair bounced with each eager step she took, making her look more alive than I'd ever seen her. Maybe my enthusiasm was contagious. I can't help it. This feels like the first real step in finding my mom. I can't wait to meet Professor Brossard. Dom paused on the sidewalk, pointing up ahead. Hang on, what's going on up there? I followed her look with a groan. Looks like a film set. Oh yeah, I remember seeing that flyer at the Honey Pot. I think it's a Clayton Miles movie. It is. Did I mention he stopped by the apothecary the other day? No. She turned and drilled her eyes into me. And that's definitely something you should have mentioned. I guess I'd been too concerned about Sean to mention Clayton, and I obviously didn't bring up either one to Gayla. There was no need to hurt her feelings by sharing stories of Sean and Abby. I'll explain, but is there any other way to get to our class? Not if you want to be on time. All right, but let's try to hurry past the set. I don't want to get caught up in the crowd and be late. I filled her in on my strange meeting with Clayton a few days earlier, pushing as quickly as we could through the thick crowd that had gathered around the set. They were mostly freshmen, if I had to guess, wide-eyed and gushing over their luck at getting to attend such a famous school right alongside real celebrities. I rolled my eyes and continued telling Dom what happened, conveying to her with my mind what I couldn't say out loud in front of the mortals. Ha, the mortals, as if I were any different. I just gotten to the part about him inviting me to the party when the crowd parted. Dom's jaw dropped. Don't look now, but... Everly! I turned to find two muscular arms reaching out from a shirtless hunk of a man. No, not a hunk. Clayton. I couldn't let his good looks distract me, but there was no ignoring him, even if I tried. He swept me up against his chest and spun me in a circle. I'm so glad you came out to watch us film. Wiping my face, I stepped away from him as soon as my feet reconnected with the ground. Why are you all wet? They had to spray me down with water to look like sweat. Do you like it? I look athletic, right? He flexed, and a chorus of sighs and whistles from the student body surrounding us drew my attention back to the crowd. Cell phones were pointing at us from all directions. One girl even spoke into her camera, apparently live streaming the event, live streaming me. Say cheese, Clayton whispered. He winked and blew a kiss to the camera. No, Clayton, I've got to get to class. That's my girl. Go learn something good, he called out as I stomped away. Gross. I locked arms with Dom and scuttled away as quickly as I could without breaking into a full run. That was way worse than I was expecting, Dom muttered, once we'd put some distance between us. A few cell phones still filmed me walking away, but most had turned their attention back to Clayton and the movie set. It's over the top, right? I'm not his girl. Definitely over the top. And you're right, something seems fishy about it. A trio of girls up ahead stepped onto the sidewalk in front of us. In almost perfectly synchronized time, they crossed their arms over their chests and shot daggers at me through their eyes. "Excuse us," I said, stepping around them. We were about to be late, and that was not the first impression I wanted to make with the professor who was going to help me decipher the tablet and find my mom. One girl scoffed, but they were the least of my worries. "What is wrong with people today?" I asked Dom. "Well, those 3 are Agarthians, and they're probably jealous." "Jealous about what?" "You and Clayton." "Ha! They have no need to be jealous. That guy weirds me out. And even if I was into him, he can't be with a mortal. They know that." "Well, he can't bond with a mortal. That doesn't mean he can't date one." "But I thought keepers all had soulmates anyway. Why would they care?" "They are probably hoping he is their soulmate. Even keepers aren't immune to a good-looking guy and a little glamour. And they hate to see one of their kind fraternizing with a mortal. It's like a slap in the face." "Are they really holding out hope that Clayton Miles might be their soulmate?" I cringed. "Seems a little desperate. Also, they would probably know it if he was, right?" Dom shrugged. "They say you know your soulmate when you find them, but until you do, no one really knows what to expect. It's a little different for everyone, I imagine. But don't let those girls bother you. Let's just get on to class." "Right." I risked one last look over my shoulder at the girls. They followed us, eyes hard set and trained on me. Thank goodness I had Dom here. After just 3 minutes on campus, it seemed that I was already developing an army of enemies. This year was going to be just splendid. Thanks a lot, Clayton. Chapter 4. We slipped into the classroom with 2 minutes to spare. I threw out my empty latte cup and settled into a seat next to Dom just a few rows from the back, extracting a notebook and pen from my bag. A quick glance around the room told me that I was likely the only mortal here. A cluster of white and blonde-haired Olympians sat near the front, including a male who looked like he might grow up to be a weatherman. His hair was so perfectly placed that even an Oklahoma tornado wouldn't do much to move it. Behind them was a crowd of what I assumed were Atlanteans, all with gorgeous sparkling blue eyes and reddish-brown hair. A pang struck me at the thought that in another world I might have been sitting there alongside them. The other students varied in appearance, some of the Agarthians maintaining their beautiful golden eyes, and some changing their appearance to better fit in around the mortals on campus. But they were all too beautiful to truly look human. Everyone except me. I was squarely in the mortal department when it came to looks. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. A few beautiful faces turned to stare, leaning in close and whispering amongst their friends. "Relax, guys. She's Atlantean. She just hasn't gotten her powers yet." Dom huffed out an annoyed breath and turned to me. "It'll be fine. They'll get used to you." "How do they know I'm immortal?" "It's hard to explain, but once a keeper has received their powers, it becomes very obvious to all the others who and what they are. It's almost like an aura around them." "How cool. What does my aura look like?" "You have no aura," Dom frowned. "Or at least not the keeper kind." Well, that explained all the dirty looks I'd gotten since entering the room. There was some shuffling in the seats behind us, followed by a grunt of disapproval. "The mortal is here." The newcomer didn't even attempt to lower her voice. I turned to see the 3 Agarthian girls from outside earlier. Great. This day just couldn't get any worse. Thankfully, a door at the front of the room opened then, and a tall, older man entered. He was in no hurry to settle in, slowly removing a book and glasses case from his bag. He opened a laptop, furrowing his brows and clicking around with a stream of whispered curse words. Finally, his brows lifted with a sigh. Ah, there we go. A large screen behind him lit up with a picture of the professor and a short bio. I'm Professor Brossard. Welcome to a review of the ancient languages. He smiled, moving his gaze across the faces in the classroom, faltering only slightly when he landed on me. Mercifully, he said nothing and continued with the lesson. There wasn't much of a lecture, more just a review of the syllabus and what we could expect to come throughout the semester. The final slide showed a picture of the professor with another man standing in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The men looked jovial. Professor Brossard wore a floppy canvas hat and a big grin under his sunburned nose. His companion wore a similar hat, but it wasn't enough to hide his curly orange hair. One section of curls stood out from the others, bright white, and it hung low over his forehead. His eyes sparkled a bright aqua blue, like my Aunt Millie's, and something about him intrigued me, making it difficult to pull my eyes away. I imagined he had lots of good stories to tell. We were dismissed a few minutes early, and the other students immediately shuffled through the aisles to get out, but I wasn't so eager to leave. Hey, Dom, I think I'm going to hang back for a few minutes. I need to talk to the professor. She nodded, clearly seeing my true intentions. I had to find out if he could help me read the tablet. That's fine, but I can't stay with you. I've got to get on the other side of campus. Sean is nearby, though. I'll text him to meet you on the low steps after class. If you must, I grinned. Millie would be upset if I took off without my trusty bodyguard, or at least a friendly keeper of some kind. But I wouldn't resist today, not after seeing those cruel looks from the Agarthian girls. I waved goodbye and made my way down to the front of the room. Most of the other students had already filtered out, but the professor was busy shutting down his computer. I cleared my throat as I approached, hesitant to interrupt him. Excuse me, Professor Brossard, do you have a minute? I think I can spare one. He bent over his desk, shuffling through papers and tidying up. He didn't seem particularly interested in chatting, but I figured I may as well continue since I was already here. Great, thank you. I'm Everly Gordon. I'm Atlantean, I added quickly. He would see that I had no aura, as Dom put it. I just haven't received my powers yet. Yes, I figured that was the case. Otherwise, they wouldn't have allowed you into my room. My mouth pulled itself into an embarrassed smile. Right. Well, I'm honored to be in your class this semester. I look forward to learning from you. You see, I have this artifact that I can't decipher. I don't recognize the language, but I hear you are really knowledgeable with things like that. So I'm hoping after learning from you, I'll be able to get it figured out. It is my specialty. He stopped shoving things into his bag and finally looked up at me, appraising me for just a moment before asking, What kind of artifact? It's a stone tablet, or a piece of one anyway. It may have been broken. I see. He zipped up his bag and slung it over his shoulder, squinting at me before continuing. I'd be happy to take a look at it if you'd like. Really? That would be amazing. When would be a good time? Tonight? I have a dinner meeting this evening, but I can probably examine it before I go. How about 5:30? That sounds great. Are you familiar with the honeypot? I am. Let's meet there. Ancient tablets shouldn't be quite as shocking to our people as they should be to mortals, so it's a safe place to discuss our findings. Our people. At least he considered me on the same level as the other Keeper students. Very good, sir, and thank you again. I'll see you later. I practically skipped out of the room. Maybe this day would turn out all right after all. Chapter 5. The other students had completely cleared the hallway outside of our classroom. There wasn't a person in sight. There was, however, an adorably fluffy orange and white tabby cat sitting across the hall when I exited. Hey, little guy. The cat stood and meandered over to me, winding itself lazily between my feet. I reached down to pet its head, but it ducked and moved off to the side. "I don't think you're supposed to be in here. Come on, let's get you outside." The cat moved in front of me and stopped, rolled onto its back, and shot me an expectant look. "You want me to rub your belly?" It was an awfully canine move for a cat, and one that usually resulted in playful bites and claws to the arm from my experience with our barn kittens back in Oklahoma. I reached down, and sure enough, the cat latched onto my arm with claws from all 4 feet. But it wasn't playing around. The animal instantly drew blood and bit me with a feline ferocity I'd never experienced, more like a tiger than a barn cat. "Ouch!" I tried to yank my arm away, but the cat held on tighter, kicking me with its back feet and shredding my skin with its front claws. One of the Agarthian girls from earlier rushed around the corner. "You found my sweetiekins!" Instantly, the cat released me and sulkily trotted back over to the wall where I first found it. "Your cat mauled me! Why would you bring a beast like that on campus?" The question burst from my mouth before I had time to think it through, and the cat hissed. But in that moment, I didn't care if the girl could overpower me. It didn't matter that she'd tried to murder me with a glare earlier that day, or rudely pointed out my mortality in class. My arm was bleeding, and I was ticked off. But the Agarthian girl didn't react angrily. She appeared quite calm, in fact. A slow smile spread across her face, and her brown eyes flashed with a golden glow. "Please give me my cat." "No, I told you it just attacked me." "Give me my cat, now." The girl's eyes glowed brighter, and something shifted within me. Back in the recesses of my mind, I knew I was being glamored. She was a siren, like Tate. I knew it, but there wasn't a darned thing I could do about it. "Okay," I muttered, stepping toward the animal. It turned and quickly padded down the hall opposite the girl. "What are you waiting for?" she asked, her voice somehow made up of multiple harmonies. Even as she commanded me to do her bidding, I found myself enchanted by the sound of it. "Go get it." The cat waited for me at the end of the hall. I moved for it, and just as I could almost reach out and pick it up, it moved again, turning to the left. It halted outside of a bathroom door. "Stay, kitty." I lifted both hands and tiptoed forward, aware of the Agarthian girl on my heels. She made no attempt to get the cat herself, and I knew she was playing with me for her own entertainment. I approached the animal again, and the bathroom door swung open. The cat darted inside. I turned back over my shoulder, and the girl threw her hands in the air, her expression a clear and silent insult to my intelligence. She may as well have shouted, "Get in there and grab it, you idiot!" Of course, she didn't have to say anything else. I was still under her spell from before, bound by her command to get the cat. I knew I could do nothing else until my task was accomplished. She followed me into the bathroom, where a second Agarthian from the Mean Girl squad stood waiting. Once inside, the second girl raised a hand and the door slammed shut behind us. "Did you just—" My words were cut short by a huge gust of wind that slammed me back into the wall, pinning me there, unable to move. The first girl laughed. "You weak little mortal." She turned toward the second girl. "You can drop her, Stella. She's not going anywhere. Are you mortal?" The pressure of the wind released me, but the glow of the girl's eyes and the melodic sound of her voice was just as strong a captor. I timidly shook my head, eliciting laughter from both girls now. The cat circled in place on the floor, and in a move I never saw coming, grew and shifted, standing on its feet and rising up to our height. Its fur appeared to melt into smooth, tan skin, and its face morphed into the beautiful feline features of the third Agarthian girl. Her strawberry blonde hair fell loosely to her shoulders, and her large green eyes still sparkled with golden flecks. She grimaced and marched over to the sink, scooping palmfuls of water into her mouth and swishing before spitting back into the basin. "Ew! You taste disgusting!" "I can't believe you bit her!" The first girl laughed louder now. She was having way too much fun at my expense. "Shut up, Camille. She was about to walk away. Maybe if you had shown up on time—" "Enough, girls!" Stella, the one who could apparently create gusts of wind with her bare hands, seemed to be in charge. The other two girls silenced at her command, and all eyes turned toward me. "What are you doing here, mortal?" Stella made no attempt to change the color of her eyes. They were a beautiful amber color, like Tate's. Her hair was a rich espresso, and her skin a flawless, deep golden brown tan. I imagined this was as close to a pure Agarthian appearance as they could get. She was strikingly beautiful, even with her face twisted into a mocking hatred. "Being trapped against my will," I scowled. Camille snorted. "No one is holding you here." She sneered, fully knowing that I couldn't resist her glamour. "I mean, what are you doing in keeper classes at Columbia? And don't tell me you belong here. No one has ever had to wait beyond their 18th birthday for their powers to come in. I'm not buying your story." I gulped. At least none of these girls were telepaths like Dom. "It doesn't matter if you buy my story or not. It's the truth." "Probably." She raised her hands, and another gust of wind slammed me backward, causing me to knock my head against the wall. "Watch your mouth, mortal, and watch your back, too. No one is going to sit quietly off to the side while you try to get cozy with one of our most sought-after males. If you can't keep your hands to yourself, we'll just have to show you your way out of New York." The girl was fuming. I should have kept my big mouth shut if I knew what was good for me, but I couldn't resist just a little more trash talk. My words were the only power I had over them, after all. "Aw, what's wrong? Are you sad that he might be more attracted to a human than any of you? And what about your own soulmates? Nervous that maybe they don't exist? That maybe their souls have been fractured by all the other Agarthian men who've taken mortal lovers?" I was going out on a limb with that one, but seeing as how the Agarthians seemed to hate fractured souls more than any of the other keeper races, I thought it might be a bit of a sour spot for them. And I was right. My words definitely struck a chord. The cat girl immediately shifted back into her feline form, jumping at me at the same time my hand turned the knob behind me. I'd caught them by surprise and knocked them off their guard. The door was unlocked, and I spun out into the hallway, pushing it closed behind me before I could suffer another claw attack or hurricane from Stella. I'd been prepared to run, but the guy across the hall stopped me in my tracks. "Tate! Thank goodness! I need your help!" I swear he was bathed in golden light, like a gift from above, a ridiculously attractive gift. He leaned propped against the wall, one ankle kicked over the other, expressionless with those gorgeous golden eyes trained on me. I gripped the doorknob hard, feeling the girls on the other side working to shove it open again. "Little mortal!" Camille's sing-songy voice was muffled, but I still felt its power fluttering through my mind. "I can't hear you," I shouted, drowning her out. "La la 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 la." Yep, I was restoring to the tactics of a 10-year-old. But it worked. Her already muffled voice was drowned out by my immature shouting. A gust of wind blew out of the bottom edge of the door, nearly knocking me off my feet, but I leaned against it with all my weight and somehow managed to keep them inside, but I knew it wouldn't hold much longer. "Please," I cried out again to Tate. "Don't just stand there. They're trying to hurt me." He didn't say a word. His golden eyes looked straight into me, somehow making my body come alive. After what felt like several minutes, though it was probably just half a second or so, I was burning up. "Come on, Tate! Do something!" The door gave way, and my body was thrown to the ground. I jumped up, barely risking a glance over my shoulder, as I heard Stella say something to my hunter. I never made out what it was. I was too busy running. Within seconds, I was back at the front door of the building, relieved as the sunshine blasted down upon my cheeks. But I didn't dare stop. I wanted to put as much space between those Agarthian girls and me as possible. And Tate? I didn't even know what to think about Tate. I knew he wasn't there to protect me. I knew he was just as big an enemy as anyone else on this campus. And yet I felt betrayed. Why wouldn't he help me? Chapter 6. I ran and ran and ran. If I just kept moving, I wouldn't have to worry about the strange looks I got from other students or respond to the offers for help. Humans couldn't help me. Not with super-powerful Agarthians on my tail. Though truth be told, I wasn't even sure if they'd followed me out of the classroom building. And like all good things, eventually, the adrenaline wore off. The burn in my legs brought me to a stop, and the stitch in my side bent me in half. I'd somehow wound up in a parking lot. It was mostly empty, well shaded by established trees, and it had no identifying features. I didn't even know which side of campus I was on anymore. I wished I'd paid better attention during my original tour with Dom and Gayla. But the campus wasn't too large, so I had to be near one of the main roads by now. If I continued straight ahead, I'd run into one eventually. After rubbing out a Charlie horse in my calf, I stood up to find my snowy white owl friend sitting on the asphalt a few feet in front of me. Ugh, I groaned. Please tell me you're not here to warn me of impending doom again. I stepped to the side and tried to get around the owl, but it bounced right back over in front of me. I squatted down to look into its sentient yellow eyes. I'm trying to get away from some Agarthians who are trying to hurt me right now. I don't know if you can actually understand me or not, but if you can, I need you to move, now. I stood and tried to zag back to the left, but like before, the owl mimicked my movements and blocked my way again. Okay, really? Is this like back in the alley? Are you trying to guide me somewhere? You're better than a dog, even a fluffy, helpful one like Lassie. The owl blinked. Look, Bird, I honestly do not have time for this right now. You're cute and all, but I've got to get out of here. We stared each other down for a few breaths, and then, without any warning, I lunged forward into a sprint. The plan was to catch the owl off guard and run right past it, but of course it saw me coming. Who knew owls had such great reflexes? Either that, or the bird read my mind, like Dom, and knew what was coming. But I refused to believe that. It was just an animal, right? The owl lifted off of the ground, flapping in place about as high as my shoulder. We collided, and out of instinct alone, I swatted the bird away. My hand made contact with the creature, and it was tossed several feet over to the side. I should have used that opportunity to take off and run, but I couldn't just abandon the poor little guy. Even if it was an annoying distraction in my escape, I had to make sure it was okay. I trotted over to where the owl sat on the ground. Its feathers were ruffled, but otherwise it looked to be in good shape. Good enough, anyway. It didn't look happy, though. Are you all right? The bird hopped on its feet and flapped a few feet into the air before landing again. Good. Now please don't try to stop me again. I've really got to go. The owl responded with a long blink. I stood, walking backward away from the animal. We'll catch up again soon, I'm sure. You can show me whatever it was you wanted me to see next time. I sighed, shaking my head at how crazy I probably looked. But at this point, I determined the owl was as big a part of my posse as Sean or Gayla, or maybe even more than that. We were friends, in a weird college student meets wild animal sort of way. I spun back to the front and froze in place, shocked to see a shiny black coupe barreling straight toward me. My fight or flight had been all used up, and I could not get my body to react in any sort of reasonable way. My scream matched the pitch of the brake squealing across the asphalt almost perfectly, and time seemed to slow down as the details all clicked into place. An astonishingly handsome young man sat in the driver's seat, his expression clear as the car sped toward me. Clayton Miles. He had what almost looked like a smirk on his face as our eyes locked onto each other. Dark smoke billowed from behind the vehicle, and a burnt rubber smell filled the air. My owl! He'd tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. I'd have to bring him a dead mouse or something later as a reward for trying to save my life. Again. The car was only a couple of feet away from me now. It was still slowing, but not enough. And it struck me how odd it was that I was able to think through all of this in less than a second. My body wouldn't move, but my mind wouldn't stop. And just like that, time was restored to its usual frantic pace, and the car slammed into me. Its bumper bit into my thighs, knocking me down at the same time it finally came to a stop, shadowing only my feet as I lay on the ground. Ouch! I slid backward and stood, brushing the dirt from myself. That was going to leave a heck of an ugly bruise later. My black and blue thighs would go great with the still bloody scratches running down my forearms from the nasty Agarthian cat girl. I was quite the beauty queen. The driver's side door swung open, and Clayton dashed forward. "Everly, oh my goodness, I am so sorry." I took a step back. "It's fine, really. You barely got me." "I can't believe I actually hit you. Are you okay?" He knelt and reached for my legs, but I moved back again. "We need to get you to a doctor. Without your powers, you'll need medical attention to get healed up." He raised his eyes to mine, as though he were silently looking for confirmation that I still did not have my powers. "Clayton," I put up both hands to stop him. "Seriously, I'm fine. I'll see you around." I turned to walk away, but I only made it 2 steps before I was swooped up into his arms. "Nonsense," he said. "I'm not a hit-and-run kind of guy. If you won't let me take you to the hospital, then at least let me drive you home." "I'll probably be safer walking," I mumbled, leaning away from his chest. He gripped me tighter, pulling me against him in a way that made it impossible for me to ignore the way he smelled, like bourbon and vanilla, and something woodsy that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He pulled open the passenger side door of his car and gently deposited me onto the tan leather seat. I yanked on the handle as soon as the door closed behind me, but it wouldn't budge. Leaning across the console, I reached for the driver's side door next, but Clayton was already there, tisking at my feeble efforts to bust free. I had managed to escape a siren, a shifter, and some girl who could control the wind, but there I was, run over and trapped by child locks in a movie star's car. What a first day. Chapter 7. Shifting my weight to one side, I tried to casually pull my phone from my back pocket, taking my time so as not to draw too much attention from Clayton. He was still babbling on about how I should really seek some medical attention, but I only half listened. Sean might still be waiting for me on the low steps. If I could text him soon, he might be able to get over here and rescue me before Clayton got me too far away from campus. I really didn't relish the idea of Clayton bringing me all the way home. I was sure he could find our address just fine on his own if he really wanted to, but I wasn't going to offer it up to him. Dom was in class, and Gayla had probably left already too, which meant we'd be alone. Nope, there was no way I was going to let that happen. Finally, I wrangled the device free and rested it by my leg, out of Clayton's direct line of sight. "Which way do I need to turn?" He looked in my direction, and I did my best to put on an innocent face. Let's see." We were back on Broadway. I didn't want to lead him to my apartment, so I figured my Aunt Millie's house was my next best bet. "Hang a right." With his attention back on the road, I tapped my now cracked phone screen. Nothing. After several more taps and a solid effort to restart the device, it was clear. My phone was dead. Probably destroyed when I fell on it after I got hit with the car. Freaking Clayton. The sound of his turn signal at the next intersection brought my attention back to him. "Actually, you need to keep going a few more blocks," I said, my heart rate increasing with each word. Where was he taking me now? "You're sure you're not injured?" I nodded, unsure how that was relevant to my question. "Great, because I want to make this up to you." He veered the car off in a direction I'd yet to explore. "I was checking out some of the locations where we'll be filming in Morningside Park, and I'd love to show you a really beautiful area over there. It can be like our own little secret getaway in the city." "Oh, I'm really fine with just going back home. You don't have to make it up to me at all." I tapped my phone desperately, praying that it might miraculously start working again. "I refuse to take no for an answer. It'll be quick, I promise." He flashed a bright smile and winked at me. Okay, so I could definitely see why so many other girls were smitten with him. He was undeniably good-looking. But he still gave me the creeps ever since he showed up unannounced, supposedly searching the city for me. I needed to remember that when my heart began to flutter against my will. A few minutes later, he whipped his car into a spot just a couple of blocks away from a stunning old cathedral. The locks clicked up, and for a second I considered making a run for it. Clayton watched me closely, almost as if he was suspecting what I was thinking. But my legs were sore, and he was probably fast and strong. Realistically, he'd catch me without any difficulty. Maybe if I played nice, I could get through this quickly and get back home before anyone even noticed I was missing. That seemed like my only viable option at this point. I followed him across the street where he led me to an open platform overlooking a gorgeous park full of steep rock faces and flush with trees down below. Wow, this is pretty incredible, right? Clayton grinned and reached for my hand, which I quickly shoved into my pocket. We weren't friends just because he showed me some trees, and we definitely weren't in hand-holding territory. He pretended not to notice my coldness and gestured toward a staircase to the right. "Come on, the spot I want to show you is down this way." My feet were heavy, reluctant to follow him down the winding staircase that would take us who knows where. Over my shoulder, way down the road, I could make out the gate that led onto campus. If I ran really hard... "Clayton Miles! Oh my goodness!" A group of squealing Bernard students hurried across the street. I turned in time to see his eyes narrow just a fraction for the briefest of seconds before he slapped on the smile he was famous for. The girls practically cooed as they skipped over to where he stood. "Hello, ladies." "We're so sorry to bombard you like this, but would you mind taking a picture with us? Just one?" He glanced in my direction, and I gave a small nod. "Here, hand me your phones, and I'll take a few for you," I said. The girls were practically bouncing with delight as they handed over their devices. I snapped a picture, then another, and when I picked up the third phone, an idea struck me. "Whoops!" I called out with a giggle. "I accidentally backed out of the camera. Hang on." I fumbled around with the phone, doing my best to look technologically inept, when in reality, I was tapping out a text as quickly as I could to Sean. Photographic memories definitely came in handy when recalling phone numbers. SOS, Everly. Morningside Park with Clayton Miles. Come quick. Do not respond to this number. I gave it just a second to send, then quickly deleted the message and said a silent prayer. "There we go." I snapped the last picture and handed the phones back to the girls. "Thanks," Clayton said as I rejoined him near the stairs. "Sorry about that. It's unavoidable sometimes." "No need to apologize." We began our way down the stairs, winding down to the park below. It was truly a lovely sight. If my legs weren't so sore and I was with anyone else, I might have even enjoyed it, especially once we reached the bottom and wound our way over to a pond with a rocky waterfall. "Here," Clayton grinned proudly. "I thought of you the moment I saw this the other day." "It's lovely," I inhaled and closed my eyes. With the sound of the rushing water and the scent of the greenery around me, I could almost imagine I wasn't standing in the middle of one of the most populous cities in the world. Clayton's touch jerked me back to my senses. He gently took my arm in his hands. "What happened?" he asked, eyeing the scratches. I had a little run-in with a feral cat." His jaw twitched, but if he suspected the Agarthian girls, he didn't say anything. "Hopefully those powers will come in for you soon. Then you won't have to worry about cat scratches or bruises anymore." With a frown, he ran his fingers gingerly over my skin. For a moment, I almost forgot who I was standing with. Here in the park, with birds chirping and children playing in the background, Clayton seemed more innocent, more genuine, more human. Perhaps I was being too harsh. Maybe he really was just looking for a friend. I wouldn't allow myself to get too close, but maybe I could relax my defenses, just a little. After all, if he wanted to hurt me, he could have done it 100 times over by now. We walked through the park, commenting mostly on the things around us. We laughed as he nearly got hit in the head with the soccer ball. We admired a particularly colorful flower bed, and we grumbled together as we circled back around to the staircase that would lead us back up to Morningside Heights. "So many stairs," I complained. Clayton's brows raised in the middle. "I forgot about your legs. You must be so sore. Here, let me help." He scooped me into his arms again, only this time I didn't resist. I breathed in his smell and allowed myself to enjoy it, just a little. He began the ascent effortlessly. I wasn't exactly light as a feather, but I remembered the keepers were stronger than your average Joe. This was nothing for him, so I wouldn't object. We passed a woman carrying a tiny dog in her oversized bag. She grinned warmly at us, assuming we were a couple. Clayton hammed it up, of course. He pulled me closer and snuggled my cheek, much to the woman's delight. She laughed and did a little clap before moving past. "Laying it on a little thick, aren't you?" Clayton paused. "Oh, I don't know. I kind of like the way you feel in my arms. Maybe I was doing it just as much for me as I was for her." He pulled me close again with a crooked half grin. This was what he was famous for, a charming smile and clever one-liners. He'd used them on many women before me, all featured in the celebrity magazines, with shocking headlines about how Clayton Miles did it again, one actress or singer after another. I shouldn't have been so gullible to fall for the same tricks. But in that moment, with sunlight falling across him like glittering confetti through the filtered canopy of trees, he just seemed so likable. So when he brought his face down toward mine, I lifted my chin to meet him halfway. My eyes closed, and I prepared for our lips to touch. What I did not expect was for him to drop me as an owl torpedoed him from out of nowhere. "Ah!" He waved an arm around his head. The owl flapped off into the trees again, and he turned to where I sat, shocked, with my jaw hanging nearly to the ground. "Was that an owl?" My mind raced. I almost kissed Clayton Miles on the lips, but my owl stopped me. Why? "I doubt it," I muttered, rising to my feet. "Seems unlikely that an owl would be right here in the middle of the afternoon in the city." For some reason, I felt like I should keep my friendship with the little bird a secret, at least from Clayton. "Everly!" I turned toward the familiar voice and caught sight of Sean flying down the stairs like his feet were wheels. Finesse. So that's what Sean's powers looked like. "Are you all right?" He'd barely broken a sweat, but I could tell from his breathing that he'd run a really long way. "I'm fine," I said. "Just ready to go home." Sean turned and glared at Clayton, a clear warning that he'd better not have laid a hand on me. Clayton's expression hardened, but he made no attempt to stop me from leaving. "Thanks for coming with me, Everly. I enjoyed it. We'll have to do it again sometime." The warmth in his tone made me want to believe him, but the coldness of Sean's glare said it was best to keep going. "And sorry again about earlier," he added, as Sean and I turned toward home. "Don't worry about it. See ya," I called out. "Sorry about what?" Sean asked under his breath, gaping at the scratches he just noticed adorning my arms. "I'll explain when we get home. It's been a weird morning." Chapter 8. Sean refused to leave the apartment after I detailed my eventful morning for him. He couldn't believe the Agarthian girls would be so bold as to attack me right there on campus, and over a boy who I didn't even like. Probably. I didn't think I liked him anyway. He also thought the whole Clayton accidentally hit me with his car thing was a little suspect, and it was. But he just seemed so genuine at the park. I didn't know what to believe anymore. "Are you sure he wasn't glamoring you?" Sean paced back and forth in our living room. We were just about to leave for my meeting at the Honey Pot with Professor Brossard, but he wanted to be sure he had the whole story straight in case we ran into any familiar faces while we were out. "I'm pretty sure he wasn't. Camille definitely did." I pursed my lips at the memory of the Agarthian girl forcing me to retrieve her cat, or friend or whatever. But I didn't get that feeling of losing control with Clayton. I had my wits about me the entire time. Sean ran a hand through his hair. "I just can't imagine what he wants with you." I put my hands on my hips. "Maybe he actually likes me?" My cheeks flushed at the thought. But would that really be so hard to imagine? And since when did I start arguing on behalf of Clayton Miles anyway? "You know, some guys aren't afraid to show a girl that they like her." I shot him a knowing look, though I knew I was being unfair. He could never be with Abby, and it wasn't right for me to tease him about it. Sean pretended not to notice and shrugged, quickly changing the subject. "It just seems weird, but we can worry about that later. We've got to get going, or you'll be late for your meeting." Thankfully, our conversation shifted to the tablet as we walked over to the coffee shop where I would be meeting with Professor Brossard. Sean seemed almost as excited as I felt. We might finally be on the precipice of something huge. I knew Russell had something to do with my mom going missing, and with the way his stone tablet called to me after her disappearance, I couldn't shake the thought that it was connected somehow, too. And we were finally about to discover what it said. The Honey Pot was crowded for a Monday night. Students filled the place to the brim, gathered in small groups throughout the warm and welcoming shop. "I'll stay off to the side and catch up on my reading. Classes just started, and I'm already worried about falling behind. But I'm here if you need me for anything." Sean patted my back before going up to the counter to order a drink. The espresso-filled aroma of the shop had me jonesing for a hot cup of my own, but I didn't want to waste any time in line, not when I was this close to the truth. I scanned the room until my eyes settled on the oldest man in the place. Professor Brossard sat alone at a table near the back of the shop. His salt and pepper hair would lead me to believe he was probably in his late 50s, but as an Atlantean, it probably meant he was actually in his 700s or 800s. What a bizarre thought. Gripping the tablet inside my bag, I eagerly made a beeline back toward the table. A familiar, chilly voice snagged my attention before I reached him, though. With a quick glance to my left, I found myself halted in place as though the icy gold eyes staring back at me could actually freeze me in my tracks. "Osborne, continued talking to the two shifty-looking students sitting opposite him, but his eyes were definitely locked onto me. Finally, after flashing a quick sneer in my direction, he turned back to the conversation at hand. I sucked in a deep breath and finally got my feet to cooperate again. "Everly!" Professor Brossard looked up and gave a small wave. "Hi, Professor." I slid into the seat across from him, still a little breathless and on edge from seeing Osborne. What was he doing here? Was there another fractured soul on campus? Other than me, of course, assuming that I was even fractured. Tate was already all over my case. Well, except when I actually needed him. Jerk. "You okay?" Professor Brossard's fuzzy brows gathered in the middle like one long caterpillar. "Yeah, sorry. I just thought I saw someone." I shook it off. Time to focus. "Did you bring the artifact?" "I did." I fumbled around in my bag and carefully laid the stone tablet in front of him. It looked almost fake in this modern setting. It still hadn't shown any life since I dropped it that night in the gallery, but I knew it was special. "Fascinating." The professor leaned in close. "May I?" He gestured toward the object. "Of course." My blood rushed in loud waves through my ears as I waited with bated breath for his interpretation. He picked up the tablet, cradling it in his hands with great care. I watched several different expressions transition across his face, awe and wonder, followed by surprise, and then frustration. "What is it?" I asked, unable to wait any longer. "Well," he rubbed his wrinkled forehead, "I'm not exactly sure." My lungs deflated. "Do you have any guesses?" He shook his head. "It looks a bit like cuneiform, but I don't recognize any of the symbols, and from the looks of it, it's much older than the cuneiform tablets I used to translate back in the Middle East. Where did you get this?" "Oh, shoot. Why did I not think of an answer to this earlier? It was passed on to me from an old family friend. More like stolen from an old family enemy, but potato, potato." "Well, it must be very special to your family, even if there is no way to know what it says." He laughed and handed the tablet back to me. I forced a friendly giggle, but the situation was not funny to me at all. Surely someone would be able to translate it, right? Professor Brossard frowned. "I used to know someone who might have been able to make something out of it, but he's long gone. I'm sorry I can't be of more help to you." No, I refused to accept that as an answer. "What about overseas, back in Egypt? There must be more people who learned alongside you. Perhaps one of your old classmates would know?" "There aren't many of my old classmates left, I'm afraid, and the ancient languages aren't exactly a hot topic for modern-day studies. People just don't care anymore." "I care." Oops, that was too loud. I noticed several faces from the surrounding tables turn to look in our direction. The professor pulled back with raised brows. "Well, Miss Gordon, I'm sorry, but I suggest you rethink your approach. Especially considering your mortal condition, you won't gain any favors with demands." He stood. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a dinner meeting to attend." He shuffled past me in a hurry, leaving me at the table to myself. I shoved the tablet back into my bag and rested my forehead on the cool tabletop. What was I supposed to do now? "You have a habit of causing scenes, don't you?" Crap. I lifted my gaze to find Osborne now sitting in the professor's chair across from me. Where was Sean? Wasn't he supposed to be saving me from moments like this? I glanced over my shoulder to find him on a bar stool near the front door, nose buried in a textbook while he sipped some frozen drink with a mountain of whipped cream on top. "Care to tell me why you're shouting at professors?" Osborne grinned, like he'd caught me with my hand in the cookie jar. No. Care to tell me why you care? Pretty sure we established you're not supposed to come around another hunter's case. That wiped the smile from his face real fast. I happen to be on another case here on campus, and I can't help but notice how all these fractured souls seem to be popping up in your vicinity. His eyes glowed, and the energy shifted between us. The back of my brain seemed to hum with anticipation. Glamour. So tell me, mortal, what do you know about Rasputin? Who? I wanted to please him. I didn't want to come up short for his request, but I had no idea who he was talking about. Rasputin, he repeated. The mastermind who taught your fractured friend how to poison with dark magic. I know nothing about him, I replied honestly. Osborne cursed loudly, once again drawing attention to my table. I wouldn't be surprised if they never let me into the honeypot again after this. Is something wrong over here? Thankfully, Osborne's filthy mouth drew Sean's attention as well. He stood at the edge of our table, a vein popping from his neck as he glared at the hunter. It's fine, right, Osborne? I lifted my brows. The glamour was gone, snapped by Osborne's angry outburst. But I wanted to drive home the fact that I still was not the person he was looking for, and he knew it. He grunted and waved his hand in a gesture that said, "Begone." He didn't have to tell me twice. Chapter 9. What the heck, Ev? Sean walked backward in front of me, his hands splayed to the sides. I swear, I can't leave you alone for 5 seconds without something dramatic happening. Why were you talking to Osborne? Not by choice, that's for sure, I spat back. Now was not the time for a condescending lecture from Sean. Maybe if my guardian had been paying better attention, he wouldn't have ever gotten to me. Your guardian was under the assumption that you were meeting with your professor, not a hunter. I did, and it was useless. Professor Brossard can't help, and according to him, nobody can. That's not possible, he muttered. Obviously, but I don't know what else to do. Well, you could start by staying away from Agarthians. Really? You want to keep going with this? I don't go around looking for trouble, okay? Trouble finds me, just like it found my mom. But it's fine. If you don't want to stick around and help protect me, I'm happy to find someone else who does. You need to fix your own problems anyway. My problems? And what would those be? Oh, I don't know. Maybe being in love with a mortal? How was that kiss, Sean? Good enough to break Abby's heart? Because she sure thinks you hate her right now. His face grew red, and he turned around to stomp on ahead of me. Then he looked back over his shoulder with a scowl. Abby is none of your business. And you know what? I don't think you need to talk to her anymore either. I don't need you stirring the pot. Well, someone has to talk to her, since you ditched her. He stopped and threw his hands in the air. You want me gone? Fine. I'm happy to step down from my current assignment, and I wish the best of luck to anyone else who thinks they can possibly keep you under control. He gave a sarcastic salute and stomped off into the darkness. I was left standing just outside my apartment building. I could feel the pressure of 100 gallons building up behind my eyes, threatening to break down the dam. Choking down a sob, I pulled open the door and made my way up to our unit. Hey, girl, Gayla called out lazily from her spot on the couch. She was binge-watching something on TV, barely noticing what kind of shape I was in. Thank goodness it was Gayla and not Dom. I didn't need some mind reader watching the hot mess playing out in my brain right now. I cut straight for my bedroom and closed the door behind me. Somehow, I managed to hold in all the tears until I crashed onto my bed, burying my face in my pillow to muffle the sound of my cries. And even at 18 years old, as a college student living in New York City, the only thing I wanted in that moment was my mom. Where was she, and how would I ever find her now? I didn't have Sean's help anymore, that was for sure, and I wouldn't request another guardian. I stood out enough as it was, being the only mortal in my keeper classes. Some Atlantean guardian hovering over me at all times would only draw more attention and fan the Agarthian flame. A new guardian would also prevent me from the only other option I had left. If interpreting the tablet was officially off the table, I had no choice but to take matters into my own hands. It was time to experiment with dark magic. I kept my chin down for the next few days. Gayla and Dom traded off escorting me to class, and the only time I saw Sean on campus, he quickly looked the other way. The girls begged me to call him so we could make up and all hang out again, but I refused. Anyone who could bail on me so quickly just because I pointed out his own issues wasn't someone I wanted to beg to come back into my life. Sean was stubborn, but he had nothing on me. Thankfully, with my Olympian friends by my side at all times, the mean girls on campus didn't make any more moves on me either. Life was almost simple, or it was on the outside anyway. Inside, my mind was still a mess. Every waking moment that I wasn't in class or walking to or from campus, I was holed up in my room, poring over various old manuscripts I found at Millie's shop. She didn't have much information about dark magic, unsurprisingly. I'd attempted a couple of the incantations I found, tucked into old pharmaceutical books here and there, but nothing worked. Or maybe I just wasn't pronouncing them correctly. I certainly wasn't about to ask the girls for help with that. By Thursday afternoon, I was about ready to throw in the towel. I'd even considered calling Osborne to see if I could get some info about that Rasputin guy, but I enjoyed staying alive too much to attempt that. Blowing the hair out of my face, I pulled out the last book in the pile I'd borrowed from Millie. Calling it a book was being generous. It was more like a dirty old pamphlet. A cornflower blue cover was rolled at the corners and bore brown stains of various sizes. The yellowed pages smelled a bit like cigarette smoke, and the spine was barely held together by two staples. The third staple had fallen out long ago. Small, simple letters spelled, "Adverse Effects of Dream Waltzing and How to Remedy Them, a Personal Account by Krisanna Vadim." Dream waltzing. That didn't sound like it would be particularly useful in finding my mom, but it was an awfully romantic-sounding power. I flipped open the worn cover to scan the table of contents and see if I might find anything useful inside. There was an introduction, standard practices, adverse effects, the victim, the perpetrator, and the treatment. Ooh, now we were getting somewhere good. I read on, chewing off a loose hangnail as I committed every word to memory. It seemed that dream waltzing was a fancy way of describing the act of entering another's mind, not like a telepath like Dom, but to actually interact with the other person within their mind, typically while they slept, hence the name dream waltzing. In this case, a fractured soul abused the ability and tortured a human victim in her sleep, trying to force her to later murder his enemy during her waking hours. The perpetrator was a man by the name of Renard Soulet, a fractured soul. Raised in Saint Amand, it is believed he learned the dark arts with the clan in the forests of Felleton, though he refused to reveal the name of his teacher. It is believed that he was born from an Olympian mother and a mortal father. As such, he was naturally capable of powers of the mind. A search of his home after his elimination revealed a book of spells, including the incantation used on the victim, Almacancia Descansan Nitardariel. I mouthed the words silently to myself. Could this be it? If I could somehow find a way to dream waltz into my mother's mind while she slept, maybe she could tell me where she was. It was definitely worth a shot. The worst-case scenario would be that I might fail again. Well, either that or it would work, and I'd be caught and killed by Tate for practicing dark magic with a fractured soul. No risk, no reward, though, right? 2 knocks sounded at the door, and it swung open before I could even ask who was there. Slamming the pamphlet closed, I pushed it under a school textbook and turned to see who my uninvited guest was. Gayla. And right behind her was Dom. Shoot. I immediately thought back to our lecture earlier that day in my Politics of the Keepers class. If she tried to get into my brain, hopefully she'd be just as bored as I had been during that lecture and decide not to stick around long. "Get up," Gayla said with her hands on her hips. "We're busting you out of here." "Excuse me?" "We know you've had a rough first week, sweetie." Dom made her way over to my desk, glancing only briefly at the stack of books before resting her focus back on me. "But we want to help you try to bounce back." "Yep." Gayla slid into place beside her. "So get your nose out of the books, girl. It's time to have some fun. We're taking you to your first college party." Chapter 10. A party? On a Thursday? I don't think so. I risked a glance back to the pile of books on my desk. I was kind of in the middle of something way more interesting than a party. Dom followed my gaze to the books and frowned. "Get out of my head." She blinked hard, hearing me loud and clear. I thought she might object, but her shoulders loosened and she took a step back. I felt a tad guilty, but honestly, it was a little invasive to have someone reading your thoughts all the time. I knew she was concerned, but it would be safer for her not to know what was going through my mind. I wasn't worried about getting myself into trouble. I wouldn't be able to avoid it if I was fractured anyway, but I definitely didn't want to drag my friends down with me. "Yep, a party on a Thursday, and any other day of the week. Welcome to college." Mischief glinted in Gayla's heavily made-up eyes. She marched over to my closet and began shifting through my clothes. "Maybe I'll let you borrow something of mine," she added, obviously unimpressed by my Oklahoman wardrobe. Objecting would be futile. I could tell by the way Gayla moved that they weren't going to let me skip out on this. "Fine," I conceded. "But promise me we won't be out too late. I still have class in the morning." Gayla crossed her heart. "Scout's honor." But her wink at the end did little to convince me she would stay true to her word. An hour later, we stood on Riverside Drive in front of a tall, Parisian-looking building adorned with windows and private latticed balconies. The building seemed alive, laughter trailing out through the windows, which glowed faintly in the twilight hour. I glanced at my friends. "Are you sure we're not overdressed?" We stood on the sidewalk, fully decked out in cocktail dresses and the highest of heels. Gayla looked like a model, her platinum blonde hair falling in perfectly coiffed waves over her bare shoulders. She had more unbelievably toned leg on display than I knew was possible without being completely naked, and she left every girl within a 3-mile radius feeling completely inadequate. Dom, of course, looked just as good in a slightly more modest dress, more sassy than sexy, and I stood awkwardly between them in one of Gayla's less revealing numbers. "St. A's won't let you in if you're not dressed to the nines." Gayla dipped her chin toward the entrance. "Shall we?" I followed them to the door, where a freshman in a literal tuxedo stood as a doorman. He nodded at Gayla and Dom, but promptly extended his arm in front of me before I could step inside. Gayla sighed and rolled her eyes. "Let her in. She's one of us." The boy frowned, squinting at me like he was missing something. "I don't think so. I was given strict orders." "Move." A deep voice rumbled from over the boy's shoulder. I looked up to see Clayton grinning down at me. "You came." His voice was lighter now, and despite what was good for me, it sent a warm feeling through my belly. Dom shot me a look of clear warning, but if they dragged me all the way here to get my mind off of school, then I might as well do it with the hottest young star in North America. "She came with us, actor boy." Gayla pushed Clayton out of the way, unimpressed by his fame and good looks. None of it was anything new or special to Gayla. She didn't care about Clayton. She was here for the party. With a playful half-grin, I shrugged and followed the girls deeper into the building. This was nothing like the college parties they showed on TV. It looked more like an upscale fundraising gala, but instead of wealthy oil tycoons and their trophy wives, the elegantly designed interior was full of drunken, rich 20-year-olds. "Be right back," Gayla said with a wink. "I don't know if ambrosia is really a good idea tonight." "Relax, Mama Dom. I'll only have one." Gayla dashed off through the crowd before Dom or anyone else could object. "She'll be okay," I said, trying to reassure my friend. "We'll keep an eye on her." Dom and I moved cautiously through the crowd of keepers, many of whom had already succumbed to the blissful embrace of ambrosia. It was obvious who had consumed the sweet nectar and who had not. Those under the influence almost appeared to glow with a new kind of life. They were full of joy and free of care, practically floating through the room like the unearthly creatures they really were. "Have you been to the hall before?" Clayton's voice caught me off guard. I swung around to find him looking like a god, with his hands in the pockets of his snug-fitting charcoal suit pants. His white button-up was undone at the top, revealing just enough of his golden tan chest to leave me wishing I could see more. Phew, was it getting hot in here? "Nope, never even heard of the place." I slapped a demure grin on my face and yanked my attention back up to his eyes and away from the muscles under his shirt. "St. A's is kind of like Columbia's version of a secret society, but it's less a secret than just an elitist group. Most people think you can only get in if you come from a really wealthy family, but the truth is, you can only get in if you've got the right kind of soul." "It's a keeper society, then?" Clayton nodded. "Well, I guess it's good that keepers and extreme wealth kind of go hand in hand then, huh?" Clayton laughed, the golden flecks in his hazel eyes glittering in the light of the room. "Come on, I'll show you one of the coolest parts of the building." Dom reached out to touch my arm, a gentle reminder to stay close. "I'll be fine," I whispered to her. "You just keep an eye on Gayla. Don't worry about me." She looked nervously back and forth between Gayla and me. "Seriously." I squeezed her shoulder. "There are 100 people here. He'd have to be an idiot to try anything in front of all these witnesses. No one will mess with me." Dom released a loud sigh. "I'll come find you just as soon as she's done." Then, turning toward the bar, she called out to Gayla. "Let's go." Clayton laced his fingers with mine and pulled me down the hall. I didn't pull away this time. No, I was going to enjoy myself, even if just for one night. After all, it might be the last chance I had. Who knew what would happen after I tried the dream waltzing spell? Watchful eyes of countless other keepers followed us down the hall. We reached a wooden door near the back of the building, and Clayton gave my hand a quick squeeze before releasing my fingers. "Here we go," he said, with a conspiratorial grin. He had just reached for the knob when a loud voice called out from across the hall. "Hey, you're not allowed down there!" A familiar thrill worked its way down the back of my neck and between my shoulder blades until my whole body came alive with a slight buzzing sensation. Tate? I looked around as Clayton dealt with a bossy undergrad. "Do you know who I am?" he asked the younger man. Yuck, that was kind of tacky. But maybe the other guy had made some kind of obvious mistake. "Clayton Miles, I'm sorry, but the basement is for St. A's members only." The tingle grew stronger, through my arms and across my chest, pulling me. Where, exactly? Nothing seemed out of place around me. A frantic scan of the room revealed nothing unusual at all, no sign of Tate anywhere. Clayton turned toward the young man, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "You're going to back away and allow me and my guest to have a look downstairs. Sound good?" The guy nodded. "Yes, of course. There are suits and towels in the bathrooms." "Wait, what?" Clayton pulled open the door and gestured for me to move down a narrow staircase. "After you." Chapter 11. Did you just glamour him? I like to say I used my powers of persuasion instead. Oh, right. This was the real Clayton, the jerkwad who wasn't afraid to use other people to get what he really wanted. Now I remembered why I had been distrustful of him before. Why on earth did I allow myself to get so taken by his good looks that I forgot how to use common sense? Right, so I think I've changed my mind. I need to go find Dom. My shoulder pushed into his chest as I tried to squeeze my way past him, but he was like an unmovable slab of granite. "No," he said firmly. He pulled the door closed behind him, and his eyes clearly glowed with a warm golden hue in the low light of the staircase. I brought my fingers to my ears as quickly as I could, but it was too late. I'd looked into his eyes. I'd heard the music in his tone. I was glamored. "Keep walking." I obeyed without a word of protest. I had to. An internal battle with my own mind was raging strong. I knew I was glamored. I could feel its power wriggling in the back of my head like a worm. But as long as it remained there, I was helpless to object to a word Clayton said. Even worse, I wanted to please him. We reached the bottom of the stairs. In the center of the basement was an enormous in-ground swimming pool, complete with a hot tub and waterfall edge dripping over a stone grotto. "I remembered how much you liked the waterfall at the park," Clayton said with a mischievous smile. "So I thought I would show you one we can play in." My heart pounded against my ribs, desperately trying to break free and get away from him. But instead, I bobbed my head, awaiting my next orders. "Over there," he gestured toward the far wall. "Get a swimsuit from the bathroom and put it on. I want to see you out here again in less than 5 minutes." The bathroom was pure white, with silver-veined marble lining every surface. A small closet inside held a variety of swimsuits, each one smaller than the last. I squeezed my eyes tight, hoping with everything I had that when I opened them I would be somewhere else, anywhere else. But, alas, upon opening them, I was still trapped in the basement of some frat house, staring at a rack full of itty-bitty bikinis. I settled on a little black number and rejoined Clayton back near the pool, leaving Gayla's dress and shoes in a neat pile on the vanity. He sat on the edge of the pool, now stripped down to nothing but a pair of swim trunks he must have found in the men's bathroom. Blue and purple lights alternated beneath the surface of the water to create an ethereal glow throughout the room. It was lovely, as much as I hated to admit it. Clayton tapped the spot next to him. "Join me." I tiptoed to the water's edge, staring nervously into the depths below. One slip, and I'd drown. Surely Clayton wouldn't let me die here, right? With a deep breath of chlorine-scented air, I dropped to the ground beside him, allowing my legs to dangle into the pool. My purple toenails blurred in and out of the water's ripples, temporarily distracting me from the dangerous man controlling my mind. "You look good in that bikini," he purred. "But those legs..." He ran a smooth hand across my thigh. "It's a shame they're so bruised." I turned away. They were bruised because of him, and the irony of it all was not lost on me. We'd come full circle, and I was never more grateful for not kissing someone before. Now we sat while he ogled me in a bikini he forced me to wear. I did not appreciate being objectified, and as soon as this glamour wore off, I would let him know about it. "Come on." He dropped into the water, his head disappearing for just a moment beneath the surface before he reemerged,
treading water like it was nothing for him. He turned and faced me with a grin. "The water's warm." Why did my mom never enroll me in swim lessons? "I can't swim." My chin dropped to my chest, shame flooding me. I wasn't ashamed that I couldn't swim, though. I was ashamed that I had to let him down. I didn't want to let him down. I only wanted to please him. Stupid glamour. "That's okay. Jump in. Now." My fingertips dug into the concrete edge, even as my body betrayed me. I couldn't refuse a direct command while I was glamoured. It didn't matter if it would kill me. Eyes closed, fingers now clamping the sides of my nose, I scooted toward the edge and removed myself from the safety of the solid ground with a splash. The water was warm. At least I would die at a comfortable temperature. I felt myself sink, falling further and further until my feet hit the concrete at the bottom of the pool. I kicked hard, flailing my legs in an effort to reach the air again, but it was no use. I was too deep. I tried again and again, my lungs burning in my chest, crying out for sweet, sweet oxygen. My legs were growing weak, my mind losing focus. I wouldn't last much longer. This was it. This was the end. 2 arms wrapped themselves under my arms, and a rush of water enveloped me as strong legs kicked us back to the surface. As soon as my face broke through the top of the pool, I coughed and gasped for air, water burning at the back of my throat and nose as it dripped back into the pool with a mixture of my own snot and tears. "You really can't swim," Clayton chuckled to himself. There was no apology, no remorse in those still glowing eyes of his. I wanted nothing more than to break loose from his grip. I might even consider the bottom of the pool a more enjoyable place than being wrapped up in his arms, pressed against his hard, wet chest. "No, I told you I can't." "That was fun, though, wasn't it?" he asked, a grin creeping up one side of his jaw. "No." "Tell me it was fun." "It was fun." Ugh, maybe it was fun for you, you sadistic jerk. That's what I wanted to say, but of course I couldn't. That wouldn't please him. "Wanna do it again?" "No!" My throat still burned from before. I was still breathing heavily in an effort to replace the oxygen I'd lost the first time I went under. I couldn't do it again. "Tell me you do." "I do." Dang it, I didn't. "Tell me exactly what you want me to do to you." I fought the urge to speak the words he wanted to hear. Biting down hard on my tongue, I tried to command it to stay still, to prevent myself from saying any more. I wanted to tell him to take me back to the edge of the pool. I wanted to tell him to let me go. That's what I really wanted. But that wouldn't please him. The words caught in my throat, snagging like cotton on a rough wooden fence post. My mouth was clenched as tightly as it would go, and the taste of blood flooded the inside of my lips where my teeth tried to hold them in place. If I dared to open them, I knew what would happen. I'd ask him to throw me under the water again, and I couldn't let that happen. "Too slow," he grinned, and with no additional warning, he released me. I leaned forward, frantically grasping for his legs as they propelled him away from me. The heat rose in my chest faster this time, practically lighting my lungs on fire with an electrical sensation. My blood buzzed, begging me to give it the oxygen my body required. As my feet touched lightly to the bottom of the pool, I decided to reserve my energy. My limbs already felt tingly. I wouldn't exhaust them further. I knew I couldn't make it back to the surface anyway. I'd already tried that and failed. I'd just have to sit here and hold my breath until he hopefully decided to rescue me again. It didn't take long this time, and as his arms wrapped around me, I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through my veins. I coughed and coughed at the water's surface, rubbing the sting of chlorine from my eyes. Water wouldn't stop coming out of my mouth. How much had I swallowed? I coughed some more until I gagged, then finally inhaling a deep lungful of air, I opened my eyes. "Tate!"
"Are you okay?"
he asked. Concern tugged at his brows, and his face was red hot. "I will be," I whispered, my voice raw. He swam over to the edge of the pool and gently set me back on solid ground. The worm in the back of my head was gone. The glamour was broken. I quickly stood and ran to where the towel sat on a chair outside of the bathrooms. Wrapping myself in a fluffy bath sheet, I turned to watch the fireworks show going off in the pool.
"What were you doing?"
Tate was swimming like Michael Phelps over to where Clayton waded in the shallow end of the pool.
"I was doing what you asked me to, man. Back off. You almost killed her. I wasn't going to let her die."
Tate finally reached him and reared back a fist. I almost cheered as it moved to connect with Clayton's perfect nose, but his eyes began to glow again as he shouted, "Stop it." It didn't stop Tate in his tracks like it would have done to me, but it did slow his momentum enough that his fist connected with Clayton's face with only a soft smack instead of the pounding I'd been hoping for.
"You took it too far."
Tate was furious. The initial impact of Clayton's glamour wore off quickly, but Tate wasn't interested in hitting him again. He swam over to the edge of the pool and lifted out of the water, his collared shirt and suit pants drenched and clinging to his perfectly toned body like a wax mold. My jaw slammed shut, and I pulled my eyes away as soon as I remembered what exactly I was looking at here. Two beautiful dudes who had both attempted to drown me, glamour me, and now spoke like they were in on it together. They were gorgeous, but they were villains. I tiptoed toward the door, trying my best to not draw any attention.
"I didn't take it far enough," Clayton spat back at Tate. "Look at her, still just a frail little mortal. She has no powers at all."
They both turned in my direction. Crap.
"Take my jacket," Tate yelled at me. "You're dripping wet, and it's chilly outside tonight."
His suit coat lay on the floor just a few feet from where I stood. I scurried over and nabbed it, throwing it over my shoulders as I dashed toward the stairs. No use sneaking now. They knew I was making a run for it. I didn't wait to hear what they said next. I'd heard enough. Tate wasn't the only bad guy after my soul, apparently. He had help, and lots of it. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Chapter 12. I burst through the door at the top of the stairs and scanned the crowd, desperate for a friendly face. My eyes finally landed on Dom, and I rushed forward into her open arms. Her face was pale as she held me back at arm's length to examine me, then pulled me close again, patting my back. "Oh, Everly, I'm so sorry I let you go with him. I want to hear what happened, but first, let's get you out of here and find you some clothes." She released me and turned around.
"Gayla!"
Then, taking notice of the onlookers beginning to gather around, she put both hands on her hips, swiveling her head back and forth to make sure they were all paying attention to what she said next. "There is nothing to see here, people. Turn around and go about your business. This girl clearly does not need you all staring at her right now." Gayla stumbled into the circle, brown eyes bright and mouth in the shape of a perfect O. "We're leaving." Dom looped one arm through mine and one arm through Gayla's and tugged us toward the door. "Move it, people!" The other college students scattered. No one messed with Mama Dom when she was angry. With one last glance over my shoulder as we ducked out the front door, I saw the tall, toned figure of Tate, my rescuer and hunter, my enigma, dripping wet at the end of the hall, and something stirred within me. I didn't know whether to feel grateful or angry. I probably should have been more afraid, really, but he had a knack for showing up and saving me just before things got really bad. Our eyes met briefly before Dom yanked me outside. I pulled Tate's suit jacket tighter around my shoulders as the cool evening air cut through my wet towel. We turned back toward the apartment, and like a flash in the night, Sean appeared suddenly before us, panting as he bent forward to rest his hands on his knees. "Sorry," Dom whispered. "I called him when I lost you back at the party. I came as fast—" He stood and looked me in the eye, his face contorted into a mask of regret. "I'm sorry, Everly." "It's fine," I said, trying to choke down the emotion that was welling up in my throat. "It's not fine. It was a stupid fight, and even if I wasn't assigned to you, I still wouldn't want you to get hurt." "It was a stupid fight. I'm sorry I started it. I need to work on keeping my mouth shut. If anyone should apologize, it's me." "No, really. I needed to hear it, and I need to talk to Abby. It's the truth, and it's no reason for me to stop protecting you. If I had been here tonight doing my job, then— Wait, what did happen here tonight?" He seemed to have just noticed me trembling in the wet bikini, towel, suit, jacket combo. Gayla nodded emphatically, eyes still a little glassy from the ambrosia. "Yeah, spill it, girl." So I did. I told them everything that happened as we walked back to the apartment. Sean was like a raging bull by the time we reached our building, and Dom just kept shaking her head and apologizing. "You can't blame yourselves like this." We stopped outside of the entrance to our building. "It's not your fault. I'm a big girl. I should have known better. Just know it won't happen again. I will never allow myself to be alone with Clayton Miles or any other Agarthian again." "Never say never," Gayla mumbled as a shiny black coupe pulled to a stop beside us. Clayton rolled down the passenger's window. "Can we talk?" Sean rushed the vehicle before I could give an answer, and Clayton rolled the window back up until it was barely cracked open at the top. Sean's fist connected with the passenger's door instead, leaving a sizable dent. "Sean, holy cow! That car didn't do anything to you!" He shook out his hand. "No, but I needed to release that somehow. I feel better now." Then he turned to Clayton. "To answer your question, no, you can't talk to her." "Wait." Dom stepped forward, her head tilted slightly to the side. She touched the window, staring at Clayton for a long minute. Then with a small nod, she turned to me. "It's okay." "What?" Sean spun toward her. "There is no way in—" "Really," she held up a hand. "I think you should talk to him. Just don't get in the car, okay?" I took one hesitant step forward, pulled on the jacket again to cover myself and find some warmth, then turned to my friends for reassurance. Sean scowled with his arms crossed, ready to pounce on Clayton at the first sign of foul play. Gayla stared dreamily at the lights glinting off the facets of her bracelet, seemingly unaware of the weight I was feeling. I knew she cared, she just had a funny way of showing it, especially with ambrosia still coursing through her veins. But Dom, thank goodness for Mama Dom. She smiled, sensing my trepidation, and silently mouthed that it would be okay. I moved forward to the vehicle as the window rolled down again. Over my shoulder, I heard Dom telling the others to give us a little space. "Hey," Clayton said, a sad smile playing across his handsome face. I twisted my lips to the side, biting down on the sharp retort I wanted to send his way. He tried to kill me an hour ago, and I hadn't forgotten. "Sorry about earlier. I'm not even sure I can give you a good excuse or explanation, but I'm sorry." "Really? You tried to kill me, and you have no explanation for it? You just expect me to accept your apology?" "I do have an explanation." He ran a hand through his hair. It had fully dried in all kinds of odd angles, and he looked more down to earth with the messy locks of a normal dude, rather than the finely styled hair of a star. "I just can't share it with you." "Because Tate told you not to?" He gawked at me. "Yeah, I heard you guys. Did he really ask you to try and kill me?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, unsure if I really wanted to know the answer. It was no secret that Tate was after my soul, but to think that he would ask his friends to help bring me down just, well, it kind of hurt my feelings. which was ridiculous, I know.
Not exactly. It's complicated, but no, I wasn't trying to kill you, and neither is he. Never mind.
Nope, you can't just never mind the end of that thought. If you are genuinely asking for my forgiveness, you're going to have to explain.
I can't. But you know that sometimes a big emotional event can trigger your powers to kick into play, right?
I do now.
He smiled. Well, I'll leave it at that. But I wanted to make sure you know that I'm done. I have nothing to do with whatever happens in the future, and I'm sorry for toying with you over the last week. But you did look good in that bikini. He winked. So, truce?
I shook my head. I don't think so. Not yet. But I appreciate your apology.
Well, I'm headed back to LA this weekend. The movie was canceled. If we run into each other again, I hope we can be on good terms, or at least start fresh. But if not, well, I appreciate you letting me get that off my chest anyway. Take care of yourself, Everly.
Thanks. You do the same. He offered another genuine smile, then rolled the window back up and drove away. Once his red tail lights had rounded the corner ahead, I turned around to find myself alone on the sidewalk. Dom really knew nothing was going to happen to me. She must have coaxed Sean and Gayla back inside. I took a moment to breathe in the cool night air as Clayton's words swirled through my mind. Tate couldn't take my soul until he had proof that it was fractured, and he wouldn't get that proof until my powers appeared. And what if I beat him to the punch? What if I could somehow induce my own emotional event that could bring them forth? I thought through different scenarios as I made my way back up to the apartment. My friends were all gathered in the living room, anxiously awaiting my return. They'd probably been staring out the window at me if I knew Sean. "Everything okay?" Dom asked, though she already knew exactly what Clayton's intentions were. "It will be," I sighed. "I'm going to go get showered up and hit the hay. It's been a long week." I disappeared into my room, draping Tate's jacket over my desk chair. My mom getting kidnapped was pretty traumatic, and that didn't trigger my powers. Tate caused an explosion in the gallery and almost drowned me on Gayla's boat. Then Clayton almost ran me over and drowned me again for good measure. Nothing had caused my powers to appear. Was there really anything I could do that would? I picked up my vitamin bottle, shaking the very last pill into my palm. I looked at it, thinking of my mom. "Don't worry, I'll get my powers somehow and find you if it's the last thing I ever do." I swallowed the vitamin and turned toward my bathroom, stopping for just a moment to eye the books still stacked on my desk. If I couldn't trigger my own powers or practice dark magic on my own, I wondered if there was someone else who could lend a hand in that department. Osborne said there was another fractured soul on campus. What if I found them first? What if they could somehow lead me to this Rasputin guy, and he could help me dream waltz to my mom? Or better yet, what if he could help me trigger my own powers?
Meanwhile, Russell glanced at the clock hanging on his dingy white wall. The office space he rented in West Harlem left much to be desired, but it was only temporary. He'd had to find a new meeting location after his quick exit from the gallery, and his warehouse in Hunts Point wasn't suitable for polite conversation. Then again, this meeting he was currently awaiting may not end in polite conversation either. Russell suspected he knew what the professor would say. He'd suspected Everly took the tablet ever since he first discovered it missing the night after the explosion. But if the professor dared to suggest any truth to the rumors surrounding the relic, things could get ugly. Russell would have no choice but to take action against him. A knock on the door sounded the man's arrival. "You may enter," Russell called out. Professor Brossard walked into the office and gave a timid bow. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. May I speak candidly here?" He scanned the corners of the room, likely searching for cameras or other recording devices. The professor was naive, but he wasn't a fool. Russell appreciated that about him. "You may." Russell gestured toward the empty seat across the desk from him. "This is not the most luxurious building in New York, but it is quite secure. We will not be overheard." "Very good, sir. You see, I've come to you about something rather important. It's the prophecy of deliverance." He lowered his voice when he mentioned the tablet, despite Russell's earlier reassurances. "A student approached me recently. She appeared to have a piece of the original relic, and she was inquiring about its text. Have you noticed it missing from your collection?" "Of course I have." "Oh." The professor's face went slack. He hadn't been expecting that. Should I have retrieved it for you?" "No, it's quite all right, Professor. You know the tablet has no true meaning. The prophecy isn't real, so this student— I'm sorry, I didn't catch a name." "Everly Gordon, sir." A frown tugged at Russell's mouth. "Right. This Everly will find it useless. You know I only keep it tucked away to keep the rumors at bay. We don't want another incident with one becoming obsessed over it again, now do we?" "No, sir." The professor's Adam apple bobbed with a large swallow. "What did you tell her?" "About the prophecy? Not a thing." Professor Brossard shook his head rapidly. "Well, of course you told her nothing about the prophecy. As we discussed, it's all just folklore. But what did you tell her about the tablet?" "I told her it was unreadable. I couldn't make out the symbols, and I told her no one else would be able to either." "Did you mention Driscoll?" "No, of course not." "Good." Russell drummed his fingers on the desk. "Was there anything else?" "No, sir." The professor paused. "Well, actually, I touched the relic. As I was inspecting it, you don't think—" His face crinkled, a sheen of sweat reflecting the fluorescent lighting overhead. "That you have been cursed?" Russell raised a brow. "It's folklore, Brossard. What happened with Driscoll is purely coincidental. He allowed his obsession with the object to get the best of him. Nothing more." "Right. Thank you." The professor stood, hesitating, as though there was more he wanted to say. "Well, I guess I'll be on my way then. Goodbye, Professor." As soon as the man disappeared through the doorway, Russell extracted a notepad and pen from his desk drawer. He hastily scribbled a message and folded the paper, tucking it into an enchanted envelope that could only be opened by the intended recipient. On the outside he wrote one word: Barius. 2 long strides had him at the window, which he struggled with momentarily before the glass finally lifted. He snapped his fingers, but he didn't have time to wait for the messenger. Instead, he clipped the note to a fastener placed just outside the sill and slammed the window closed. He'd just gotten resituated at his desk again when another knock sounded at the door. Gayla's voice called out. "Russell, it's me. Sorry I'm late." He wasn't sorry she was late. He'd been counting on it. "Enter." He pinned the girl with a disapproving glare as she dropped her designer bag on the floor beside her chair and plopped down with an annoyed huff of air. "Punctuality is a virtue." She rolled her eyes. "I actually was on time today for once, but I ran into Professor Brossard at the elevator. Was he here to see you?" Russell's lip pulled up in disgust. "Why would I need to speak with a linguistics professor?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I was just surprised to see him here. Anyway, let's get this thing rolling. I have a date tonight, and I don't want to be late." A scuffling sound came from the window. Russell glanced through the corner of his eye in time to see a large brown owl retrieve the note and take off into flight. Satisfied that he'd done all he could for the time being, he turned his attention back to the disrespectful seer before him. "Have you managed any other visions since our last meeting?"
Gala paused. "No." She was lying, and she wasn't particularly good at it. But what was she afraid of revealing to him? He'd wager it was about Everly.
"Are you quite sure?"
Another pause. "Yes." He'd have to speak with Barius about putting a stop to her fledgling visions for the time being, at least until they were able to remove Everly from the equation. That girl was dangerous, and they couldn't risk Gala seeing something incriminating.
"Very well, then. Let's begin with today's practice."
This has been Fractured Secrets, Daughter of Sea and Sky, Book 2. Part 1.